Welcome to the show, IB Nation Sports Talk up and rolling. It is Thursday, and it is a big day. Don't do a double take. You've got the right show. Along with Brian Driscoll, I'm Sean Stiers. This is like one of a handful of times.
Sean finally invited me on his show.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. It begins.
Got to kick it off right, baby. Got to kick it off right.
We are gathered here today to talk about a big-time commitment for Notre Dame. Elite 6'4", 230-pound edge rusher Rodney Dunham has committed to Notre Dame. Of course, today, as I'm sure a lot of Irish fans know as they file into the show here this afternoon, the Charlotte, North Carolina native has torn it up at Myers Park High School and is ranked number 7 in the nation, the number 7 player in the nation by On3. So let's just jump right into it. Brian, how big is this for the Fighting Irish?
I mean, this is a big one, Sean. I mean, there's so many layers to this. You know, we're going to break down his, how good of a player he is. That's obviously anytime you land a talented player, that matters. We're going to break down the fit in the class. He's a great fit in the class, football-wise, personnel-wise, a lot of those things. But just there's also sort of the perception aspect of this. And the perception doesn't impact how you play, but perception can impact how other big-time recruits view you. And so when you look at Notre Dame's recruiting in recent years, I mean, they've landed some big-time players, but they haven't landed a guy ranked this high since back in 2011 when they landed Darren Lynch and Stephon Tuitt, who were big-time 5-star players. And so when you land a guy like this, on top of all the things that we're going to break down about what he literally adds to the class as a prospect, when you're trying to build an elite class and you're trying to build off of a 14-2 season and you're trying to show like, hey, we're turning that corner from a recruiting standpoint, go get a 5-star defensive end from the South. And here's to even make it better. Go beat Georgia for that 5-star defensive end for the South. And it just so happens that it came 6 days after you beat Georgia for a top 50 player who plays defensive end from North Carolina, because Ebenezer Iwatade is the number 36 player in the country, according to On3, and they beat Georgia for him. So you just beat Georgia, who's been the bully in the recruiting trail in the Southeast for years, for 2 Southern players that they wanted who are defensive linemen and ranked as top 50 national recruits. If that's not a sign that Notre Dame is turning that corner from a recruiting standpoint, then I don't know what else we need to see. I mean, you saw Javion Osborne, retweet the commitment. This is the kind of commitment, Sean, that makes other recruits do a double take. Like, hold on a second. They got him and him now? Like, okay, Notre Dame is serious. And, I mean, it's the kind of needle-moving commitment that you get from a perception standpoint that can really open people's eyes and certainly get the fan base fired up. There's no doubt about that.
I mean, I feel like I've got to ask you this because with the issues, that's gone along with the defensive line over the last few years. I mean, like you said, you've got to go back 14 years, the last time they had, this big an impact guy. But, they did get the commitment from Iwatanda, as you said, less than a week ago. And now Rodney Dunham. Was Chad Bowden holding back Notre Dame's defensive line recruiting?
I mean, you could say that. I think it has more to do with the fact that they just went 14-2.
I do too.
And
I just felt like I had to.
I get it. I get it. I think what we've seen, however, is I do think that Al Washington's been unleashed a little bit. And now it's like, okay, now it's all on me. It's the guys I want. It's the players that I'm going after. And look, Notre Dame. When we get in the backstory, Sean, can we transition to that, because that kind of factors into what you're talking about?
If you want to jump into that, let's just go ahead and do it. How did they ultimately land Rodney Dunham?
Rodney visited Notre Dame last spring, and it went really well. And I felt coming out of that visit, I felt Notre Dame was the team to beat. And over the next several months, you started to see other programs get involved, and Georgia gets involved. And I thought they faded a little bit because he wasn't able to get back on campus. He's also a big-time baseball player. He had like a 1.75 ERA as a sophomore for Myers Park on the baseball on the diamond. Obviously, Myers Park also, for those who are recruitniks, is also where Drake May played high school football.
Okay. I saw he had a 90-mile-an-hour fastball.
Yeah. And so we'll talk a little bit about how baseball impacts him as a football player also. But, they kind of faded a little bit, Sean. And there was this weird period towards the end of the season where I just felt like, are they actually recruiting right now? And it was a little bit of a concern, but you're like, look, they're in the playoffs. Maybe that's it. Well, then when Chad Bowden leaves like a week after the season, less than a week after the season, you're hold on a second.
You put it all together.
Yeah. Like what, is that part of the reason why I saw some of those issues? And I think that what also happened over the last year is you started to see Chad Bowden him and his staff take on more and more and more of the recruiting responsibility. And once he left, and the coaches kind of had to say, okay, now we got to take this thing back over. And I think you started to see that little lull for a little bit, and then they just got things rolling. And so I think Al Washington is kind of taking some of the heat he's gotten in recent years, kind of personally. You saw the huge D-line offer list on the pot of gold offer. They not only are getting these commitments, but there's a 5-star top 10 national player in the 27 class, Chris Whitehead, who was on campus this past week as well. Dre Quinn's a top 100 player from Georgia that visited. Xavier Griffiths-Haynes has Notre Dame in his top 4. So right now, I mean, Al Washington is absolutely crushing it. And I think that's something that's the biggest factor along with the season, is that Al Washington has really kind of ramped things up to a whole nother level to kind of show people like, hey, I know what I'm doing here. It's time to get over the sting from a couple years ago. This is what we're doing. And you look at the future of the defensive end position. This is Notre Dame is, look, there are better defensive line tandems you can maybe point to. I still think the trio of Aaron Lynch and Stephon Tuitt and Ishak Williams is pretty great. Mm-hmm. The defensive end class of Dalen Hayes, Khalid Kareem, Julian Ekwara, Adetokunbo Ogundeji was pretty awesome. But what's different now, Sean, is it's about stacking classes. And, you got Boubacar in 23, and then you get Bryce Young and Logan Thomas in 24, and then you get Chris Burgess in 25. And now you get these two kids, and you raise the level of play even more. Now it's they're stacking classes. And it's not so much, well, if Foskey pans out, you're going to be golden. But if he doesn't, there's a big drop-off between him and that next guy.
Sure.
Now it's like you can lose a Boubacar and you can lose a Jordan Patel and still be good because you've got a Junior Tuihalamaka and those type of guys. And that's really what I love about this, Sean. But I think a big part of this was Notre Dame faded a little bit. Al Washington, Marcus Freeman both played a huge role in kind of ramping things back up. And they really emphasized getting Rodney back on campus. And the thing that I said on our intel piece before the visit was, I'm very curious to see how things go coming out of this visit, because Rodney Dunham is one of those kids, Sean, when you hear the expression that I think a lot of times gets overused, which is he's a Notre Dame kid. And I think sometimes that's just code for anyone that commits to Notre Dame. And if you don't commit to Notre Dame, you weren't a Notre Dame kid.
Right.
But
right.
Rodney Dunham is actually one of those guys where he's a high academic kid, comes from a great family, supportive family, a family that'll push him, comes from a good program. And he's just one of those guys that fits. He's a lot like Bryce Young. He's a quiet kid. He's an intellectual kid. He's not your typical 5-star personality, stereotypical 5-star personality. And he just fit at Notre Dame. And the question was, would he be reminded of that during the visit? Well, he was. And he visited, let me pull up the date. He visited in March. And I'm going to pull up the offer list. But basically, within the next couple days coming out of that visit, it was a done deal. And then my question was, okay, it's great. It's a done deal. He's going to commit at some point. But at the time, he was still planning on taking officials, and it was going to be a process, right? So it was like, okay, yeah, I feel great about it, but I'm not ready to do backflips yet, even though I think they're in a great position because there's a lot of holding on they need to do. This is on March 21st. Well, then I think within a week, he announces he's going to make his announcement on April 10th. Well, by that time, he had told Notre Dame he was coming. So when he made that announcement on late March that he was going to make his decision on April 10th, it was done. He had committed to Notre Dame.
Okay.
And so that's when they got the win. And here's a funny, an interesting tidbit, Sean. I couldn't announce this on Saturday because obvious reasons, but when Ebenezer Iwatade committed to Notre Dame on Saturday, one of the big reasons he committed was Rodney Dunham. So when Rodney Dunham told the staff he was coming, he immediately went into recruiter mode. And that was a big reason him and Ebenezer have a really good relationship. And that relationship was one of the big reasons why Ebenezer decided to do it now. Now, Notre Dame's been his leader for a while for Ebenezer, but he was going to kind of continue the process. And Rodney was like, hey, let's do this thing. Let's be these North Carolina, bookend defensive ends. And so he actually had an impact on getting a commitment before he publicly committed. And there was even some conversation of Ebenezer not announcing his commitment till after Rodney, but Rodney didn't care that he went ahead and did it before him. And so I couldn't share that story at the time because I couldn't tell you that Rodney was a big reason why Ebenezer committed. Well, why would Rodney Dunham care? He hasn't decided yet.
Yeah, exactly.
So I had to hold on to that little tidbit. But Rodney, I mean, he's already really heavily involved in trying to get more players to come. And now this is your third front seven player from North Carolina because he also joins Thomas Davis Jr., who is a linebacker from North Carolina. He's from Wellington, North Carolina, whose dad is Thomas Davis, obviously senior, who played for the Carolina Panthers. So really hitting North Carolina hard. Obviously, you got Bryce Young in last year's class from North Carolina. So, but this is just one of those ones, Sean, where you felt like if Notre Dame handled this recruitment right and pushed the way they needed to, I always felt good about this one because this young man is such a natural fit into what Notre Dame is all about. I mean, you heard him when he's talking about all these schools and this coach and this system, but what did he talk about when it came to Notre Dame? The people, the relationships, the opportunities beyond football. That message is going to resonate with some kids more than others. And I had a feeling it was going to resonate with Rodney if they were able to kind of stay on that. And now Washington obviously did a great job with that. And now you've got another big time defensive end in the class. So very, very well done by the Notre Dame staff, and two big wins in a row now for Al Washington.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like when you get two commitments like this within, less than a week, there had obviously been some fan frustration at the lack of momentum coming out of the college football playoff. And, why haven't we capitalized on that momentum? This feels like it is the start of, some major momentum along those lines.
And I think a lot of that had to do with impatience, Sean, and I went back and pointed this out. Last year from January 1st to, I think it was like middle of March, Notre Dame landed 6 commitments. But that was out of the norm. In the past, it was like 2 the year before, 1 the year before, 2 the year before, 1 the year before that. That's not usually a big landing players period. And then, of course, you had some of the slow going because you had Chad left, and then Mike Martin's got to come on, and then Caleb Davis got hired as the GM at San Diego State, and then then you had to replace him. So like Chad's replacement, you had to replace Chad's replacement, or the guy that at least took on Chad's job until Mike Martin got hired. So I think there was a lot of people looking to, I want to see the benefits of the season now.
Right.
And what we said at the time was, look, March is going to be that time when that foundation is laid, and then we'll see the March and April, because that's when you're going to start getting kids on campus. And Notre Dame decided instead of getting kids on campus right away, they wanted to wait till spring ball started to get kids on campus for practices and meetings and things like that. And so that created a little bit of a lull. And I also think there was some let me just say, some shift in emphasis as the coaches took back over control of the recruiting operation, where maybe some of the guys that were being pushed for early were primarily part of the recruiting staff, and Chad Bowden, one of those guys, which is why you saw some guys immediately commit to USC, because they were more so following Chad as opposed to necessarily the school he was at. And so there was a change in emphasis and change of focus with the staff, that they wanted to go in a different direction. And obviously Rodney Dunham and Ebenezer were two of those guys, because Ebenezer got offered after that departure from the previous coordinator. And so, and now you see where they're at. Because I think the previous staff focused more on Samote Kotaanga, who's an excellent player as well, whereas Al Washington liked more of the more athletic, twitchier guys on the edge, and that's where you saw a little bit of a shift. And now you see,
who doesn't love an athletic, twitchy guy?
I know, right?
Come on.
Exactly.
We all wish we were still athletic and twitchy, don't we?
Yeah.
All right. So let's go big picture on this a little bit then. How does this impact the entirety of the 26 recruiting class then so far?
Well, just kind of statistically, chronologically, he's the 9th player to commit to Notre Dame in this class. He's the 4th defensive player to commit to Notre Dame in this class, and he is the 2nd defensive end. What's interesting, as I mentioned earlier, of the 4 kids committed on defense in this class, 3 of them are from North Carolina. As I mentioned, you've got Rodney, you've got Ebenezer Iwatade, and you've got obviously Thomas Davis Jr. The interesting thing, Sean, is Notre Dame is going through a little bit of a what I believe to be a bit of a recruiting transition at defensive end right now. And what I mean by that is with shifting into a sort of a new era. It started recently. It's really ramping up even more so now, where instead of looking for like that big power end, that 5 technique type of guy, and then a Viper who's like that tall, rangy, hybrid type of guy, maybe a former linebacker, what the staff is doing now is they're more looking for true ends. And so guys that can rush the quarterback, disrupt the run, bet more all-around players as opposed to sort of fitting into that niche. And so, obviously you need the guys that can rush the passer, but at the end position, you also need guys who can be a little bit more physical against the run. And what they also like to have is guys that can kind of do a little bit more of both sides as opposed to just being an end or just being a Viper.
Yeah.
Well, what makes Rodney unique is that Rodney is a guy that can play Viper right now. He's 6'4", 225. He's twitchy. He can come off the edge. He can do some of the things that Boubacar Traore can do. I don't know if he has quite the first step that Boubacar has, but it's close. So he could play some Viper, but when you look at his frame and you see a kid who's 6'4", 225, 230, big long arms, broad shoulders, he's got a really nice thick frame, but he's a young man, Sean, that has spent all his springs playing baseball. Well, you're a baseball guy. I used to be a baseball guy. When you're a pitcher, especially, what is your focus on? Endurance, flexibility. It's not about powerlifting and bulking up.
Right.
That's part of the reason he's still at 225, 230 and not 250. So as he transitions into college as more of a football only guy, which I don't know if he's going to try to play both sports at Notre Dame.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, because I had seen in some of the
Yeah.
recruiting profiles that he maybe wanted to do both.
Yeah.
But
I don't know
TBD.
how much of a focus that'll be, but you're going to see him bulk up more at Notre Dame. And you're talking about a guy that just like that, he's going to be 250 just like that. And I see a kid that's got the potential to someday be in the 260 plus range and be even more athletic and more explosive than he is now, because it's a different type of building up your twitchiness. Whereas, baseball, a pitcher in baseball is building up his body a whole lot different than a defensive end in football.
Exactly.
When if you're a high level baseball player, you're playing baseball into the summer. I mean, so you're going right from summer league to fall camp in high school. So This is a young man that physically isn't anywhere close to being the player he's going to be. So the point is, that's why I see him being eventually a guy that can play sort of that field end position and be more of that power edge rusher as opposed to a Viper or a weak side end, which is ideal, Sean, because when you got him and you've got Ebenezer in the same class, you want to make sure that these are two guys that can play together, because it doesn't matter if you land 2 5-star ends if they play the same position, because then you can't play them both together. These are two young men that I think can play together. They bring some different skill sets to the table. They bring different athletic traits to the table. But the one thing they both have is high upside from all-around players. Ebenezer's a really good run defender for a skinnier kid. Rodney's got tons of potential as a run defender. Ebenezer's a more established pass rusher. Rodney's still evolving that part of his game technically, but he's got all the skill sets to be I think as a pass rusher, he reminds me of a more impactful version of Khalid Kareem. You could maybe go back and look at like a Romeo Okwara type of player, but he reminds me a lot of Khalid, but he's more explosive than Khalid. Where Khalid was a dominant edge rusher, but Khalid was also a clutch sack guy. I think Rodney brings a lot of those traits to the table, but with more pass rushing potential in that position, which makes those two really unique. Really a unique combination. And what's funny is the comp that I often use for Ebenezer is Julian Okwara.
Okay.
So you look at that, and they were obviously in the same class back in 2016. They were part of that, it was the 2016 class.
The Okwaras were from Carolina too, weren't they?
Right. They were from Charlotte.
Yeah.
Ardrey Kell. Yeah. So they've had success in that state, and they're really ramping it up in recent seasons. And of course, and look, Sean, the reason it's important when you talk about class impact also, the reason it's important to get these two kids from North Carolina is because this is a state that is very important for Notre Dame. And this is one of those states where success in this state is partly why you join the ACC, because you want to tap into that East Coast pipeline from sort of Virginia on down, not just from a TV market standpoint, But one of the things that Notre Dame talked about when this move was made is that's an ascending area that we want to tap into for recruiting in basketball, but then also in football. And so you're seeing that. I mean, Chris Tyree from Virginia, CJ Procyse from Virginia. You're starting to see more players from Virginia being recruited to Notre Dame. You're starting to see the Carolinas are obviously a more impactful areas, not just with, the Aquaras, but you're seeing it, other years you had Sam Pendleton and Sylvan Absher a few years ago. 2 years or last year, you had 3 last year. You had Bryce Young, Micah Gilbert, and Jack Larson were all from North Carolina. And now you've already got a 3-man North Carolina class now. Plus, there's other kids from North Carolina that you're offering. They just offered a receiver from North Carolina yesterday. Xavier Griffin-Haynes is another defensive end that they're still recruiting because they would like to add another defensive end. We'll get into that later. He's another stud from North Carolina that was going to make on campus last week. When we got that bad weather, Sean, that's when he was going to be flying in. So they had to, his visit the flight got canceled because of weather. But they're hitting these regions hard. So it's really checking all the boxes, right? I mean, that's what we're doing. You got a position need, you got a numbers need, you got a skill set need, all checked, and you're able to tap into a region that you want to hit. And the reason that matters, Sean, it's like with anything. You're from Kansas, right? What's your reaction whenever you're somewhere and you bump into someone who's from Kansas? It's like you feel like you have this automatic connection, like, hey, where are you from? And like, oh, I'm from so-and-so. And that's what it's like with these student athletes. Like, kids from Texas come up and are like, oh, Leonard Moore's from Texas, and hey, okay, I there's evidence of people coming from where I'm from to college and being successful at Notre Dame. And the same thing here, like, oh, Bryce Young's doing well, and Micah Gilbert's doing well, and the Aquaras had success here. Like, hey, there's evidence that I can leave home and leave the Carolinas or the South and go there, because look at his 5 finalists. It was Georgia, it was Duke, it was South Carolina, it was Tennessee, and then Notre Dame. And it's the same thing for Ebenezer. It was like Georgia and the NC State and Southern schools, and then Notre Dame. So the more of these kids you land, honestly, the easier it is to get the next batch of them, because that pipeline has been established. And that's part of the reason Southern schools fought so hard to keep Notre Dame out of the South, because the last thing they wanted to see is Southern kids going up there and being successful in football and then getting degrees and then having all this success. And then now it's like, well, now how do you recruit against Notre Dame? You better hope they suck, because that's about the only thing you can do. And that's why getting these type of players is so important.
I mean, I like the flexibility, the versatility aspect that you're talking about, where these guys can play either end and not just an either or situation, because a couple of different things. One, you get into a situation like you had this year where, unfortunately you had a couple of Vipers go out, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, who's gonna play over there? What kind of body type, and obviously they had converted Junior Tui Alamaka already to a Viper, but you start recruiting more of these guys who you can envision playing both sides. You're not converting linebackers, for one thing. And you also, I think, become even more difficult to defend when you're lining. It's like, which side is this guy going to line up on? It changes things. Well, I think.
First of all, I can't believe I forgot Jadon Blair as another guy from North Carolina
guy. Yeah.
I'm just like, I'm so ashamed of myself. This cat came to our IB tailgate for the Indiana game. That's how close I am with that family. I can't believe Jay's going to be so mad at me for forgetting about Jadon. But to your point though, Sean, that also helps you not only in handling injuries, but when you're playing those tempo teams, those teams that want to go with pace, you don't got to worry about switching sides. It's like you're just play your spot, whether you're strong side, weak side. Well, the linebacker will make the call. Then you just got to be able to go play your game. So it gives you so much flexibility, gives you versatility. It allows you to more easily overcome that. That's one of the things the staff likes about Boubacar is, if you remember, and against especially against Louisville and Miami of Ohio and Louisville, they were starting to play Boubacar on both sides more. Josh Burnham began the year at strong side end, the defensive end position, and the injuries forced them to move him back over to Viper.
Right.
So you want more of those players that can do both. And that's a very important piece of this. And Ebenezer, not right now. He's more of a weak side guy right now because he's still a little skinny. But eventually I think he can fill out to be able to do both. But Rodney definitely gives you that versatility and flexibility where I think he can play on the weak side, on the strong side. He can play the run. He can rush the quarterback. He brings that total package to the table, and that's why Notre Dame pushed so hard for him, and that's why this is such a big pickup.
All right. You want to do some film?
Yes, Sean, you know me. I'm always ready to do something.
Let's do it, baby.
Yeah, because you guys are going to see what you're going to see from this film, Sean, is there's certain traits that just pop out at you. You're going to see size, you're going to see length, you're going to see athleticism, you're going to see all those type of things, and you're going to see a lot of potential. But what you're also going to see as we dive into this is a young man that still is not really close to reaching his full potential. And so you'll see him here. He's number 14. What I like, Sean, is it's a nice get off here, right? Pretty good gets into that guy. I like that bend. He's able to kind of turn that corner real effectively.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to see this several times. And then he's got really good closing speed to the quarterback. Marcus Freeman loves length. And what you see from here, Sean, obviously Rodney fits that mold as well. As he's a very long athlete, a big framed athlete.
Yeah, this was the punt. That's right. I remember seeing this punt, and it was the first thing I thought of obviously was Jason Onye and Bryce Young, in the middle of that line with those long arms,
absolutely.
that long frame. Yep.
Absolutely. So, I mean, you're going to see a kid that right here is another example of that ability to just kind of bend around the edge, closing the quarterback. This looks a lot like, remember when R.J. Oben and Junior Tuihalamaka did this against George in the postseason, right? If you can kind of close that end, because what can happen is if you can't, then you take a little bit of a wider angle here. Then the quarterback has that extra second where you're able to kind of bend, get into that pass rush lane, and then close in the quarterback. And he brings a lot of those traits to the table. He doesn't have a ton of sacks. He's had like 12 sacks the last 2 years, but he's got a lot of pressures. There's some technical things about him. Like you'll see here, there's nothing technically sound about this play, Sean. And that's what I love about high school film. Some of these kids put things on there like, that's not the highlight you think it is from like a technical standpoint. This is all about just strength and motor and want to.
Right.
Like he doesn't use
his hands
through a
double team.
But he doesn't technically do well here. It's just great motor, great effort, great hustle, and just a kid that's very talented. And that's the thing that you'll see is Rodney doesn't have the tech like this. There's nothing technical. There's no teach tape here for, I want to put this on my film. This is just a kid who's really talented and really athletic that's able to win. As he learns to, because why? Because he spent the whole spring and summer playing baseball. As he develops more, and those are things that you can teach. But what you can't teach, Sean, is are you 6'4"? Do you have long arms? Do you have a great frame?
Exactly.
Do you have great athleticism? Are you flexible? Are you versatile? Can you bend around the edge? Are you a tight hipped guy? Are you a tight ankled guy? And he's none of those things. He checks the boxes on all those things. The athletic package that he brings to the table is really impressive. And that's why I get excited. So like what's interesting about him, about his rating, Sean, is you look at On3 has him as the number 7 player in the country, and he's a 5-star. And then on 247 has him as the number 14 player in the country. He's a 5-star there. But I don't have him as a 5-star right now. I have him as he graded out as a top 75 player because I do it differently than they do. Because I take the current grade and then the upside grade. His upside grade is 5-star. It's enormous. But it's those technical things that need improvement and need a lot of work and he's got to get bigger and stronger. So those things are what kind of hold him from being a 5-star right now, but the upside is enormous. But here's what I love, Sean. This is another example of something. Plays like this are kind of common on his film. But look at that's instincts. That's feel, right? They're showing run. He sees it, but then he feels the quarterback pull it, gets his hands up, gets him up there fast, breaks up the pass. He's a high football IQ guy. And he has a lot of snaps where he's coming off the line. He doesn't have that win. The quarterback throws the ball and he just goes up and bats it down. And that's kind of a lost art at times with good pass rushers is, look, I know I'm not getting to the quarterback right now. So let me get my eyes into the backfield and find the ball. Here's another example. And those are impactful plays. I mean, how many times have we seen Notre Dame get beat by a quarterback who gets the ball just over top of a defensive lineman who never gets his hands up to the football? And you're like, just put your hands up. This is another example. On the stat sheet, Sean, this doesn't show anything. I don't think maybe he breaks it up. This isn't going to show up on the stat sheet. It's not going to be a tackle, not a tackle for loss. It's not going to be an interception or sack, but it's a big play and it's an instinctive play. What you see it in college ends. College ends see this right now. They're thinking, oh man, I got a clear run to the quarterback. I'm going to drill this guy. But Rodney's like, hold on a second. This was way too easy. They're trying to do something right now. You see him gather and say, and now he's got his eye. Right now, he's got his eyes on the quarterback. And as soon as the quarterback goes to throw, he gets his hands up and knocks down the pass. Those are those things, Sean, that you're like, again, the unteachables, the teachables and the unteachables. The teachables, like that's what you get paid for as a college coach. Give me that. I don't care if a kid can run a route. When I was a receivers coach, I don't care if you know how to run routes. I don't care because that's what I get paid to do. I need to know if you're fast, are you flexible, are you smart, can you catch? Those are the things you look at. And Rodney's got all the unteachables. Look at this, Sean. Look at that fast hands, how he gets around that edge. Like that's just God gave him that. Who taught him to do that? God. That's where that came from. You know what I mean? Like he was just born with that blessing. But there's some technical things here too with his feet that when he gets more technically advanced, he closes quicker. And instead of this being a pass where he hits the quarterback after the ball's gone, he either hits him when he's still throwing or he gets there before the ball is thrown. And those are the things where I say they're going to get there. He's going to learn those things. And then once those things combine with just the God-given ability, the length, the size, the strength potential, the instincts, the explosiveness, the lateral quickness, all those physical traits that he has, once the technical stuff comes along, he's going to be a really, really impactful player. I love this one too, Sean. He's got a lot of edge rushing potential. Look at him just lock that guy out, keeps his eyes inside, securing his gap, closes on the football. Again, he brings a lot of run blocking, run defense, and pass rushing potential to the table. I think you can see why I'm saying, like, I see this kid fitting so well into that strong side end position.
Absolutely.
Because he's got that all around game. Here's another example. Again, got to play. He plays a little high here. You want to see him. He narrows his base a little bit. That's all stuff Al Washington can fix in fall camp, or if he shows up early in spring practice. Mm-hmm. But that strength, the ability to lock out, the speed to close in the quarterback, those are things that you look for. There's another example. Watch him just bend around the edge like that. Just watch him just dip and rip, just get right around that guy and squeeze down on the quarterback. It's another big-time play. It's a lot of talent to work with here.
Yeah, it is.
And he looks like those guys, Sean. Like, Notre Dame's trying to get away from those undersized, try-hard guys on the defensive line. They want more of those long and athletic, freaky guys. And, it doesn't take a whole lot to see that. Look at that power. I love it. Gets in the guy's chest, drives him back, but he's got his eyes on the backfield. So you see him kind of he's trying to impact the ball carrier. He doesn't need to because that's not necessarily his job. Great edge set right here. Just blows that guy up, just throws off the whole play, and now his defense gets a tackle for loss. And then look at the hustle to get back on that play. Just never gives up. He's a kid that hunts for the football, Sean.
Yeah, big time motor, you can tell.
Yeah.
And I like, he's all the versatility. Does he, like you see him sometimes in a 2-point stance, you see him down in a 3, and even with both hands in the dirt, like he can do a lot of different things.
I love this. This is a big defensive lineman right here. And he takes his outside arm, throws him inside with one arm, and gets to the ball carrier. Like, this is one of those ones where, like, okay, these are the clips you see, Sean. Like, if I was going to say, okay, I'm going to give you 5 clips that are going to show you why this kid's a stud, that's on my 5-clip reel. That play right there is, and look at those hands. He's only 225 right now, Sean. Look how much he just rocks that. And he's not even, like, hitting him really hard. He's just got those real heavy, strong hands. It's like, Sean, I know we both watched boxing back in the day. You get 2 fighters of the same size. They don't both have the same punching power.
Right.
Some guys just have heavier, faster, more powerful hands. And Rodney's one of those guys. He's just kind of got that natural pop. Love this backside pursuit here. This is that hustle you were talking about, Sean. Look at that pursuit. Boom. He's just got real heavy, powerful hands. And that's what you want for defensive lineman and offensive lineman for that matter. Look at that. Look how quickly he's working in. Look how quickly he plants and gets outside. That lateral speed is really impressive. Mm-hmm. Really well done there. Really well done. It's a long highlight tape too. There's a lot of good clips on here. Like here, he gets kind of knocked off because he's got a narrow base. He's not prepared for the hit. Those are all technical things he'll learn, but watch how quickly he resets his feet and gets to the football. Like, those are things that you can't teach. He's a really good football player. He's got fun tape. Him and Ebenezer's tape is both of them are really fun to watch. And imagine getting the batter's box against him, Sean. You know what I mean? So And he wears glasses too, so I'm a big fan of that. Kindred spirit. He's a pitcher and he wears glasses. Like, this is another big boy he's going against. You see him, not great technique with the feet, but look at the strength to get off the block destruction here. I like, and to make another play in the back. Look at that quick. Look how quickly he goes from stationary to the ball carrier.
Yeah,
like that stuff's really impressive. Really impressive.
That's a big tackle he was just working against there too.
Yeah,
a small guy.
But the thing about North Carolina, Sean, especially that Charlotte area, is it's really blown up the last 10 years from a football recruiting standpoint, which is a big reason why it's become such a priority for Notre Dame, because you're seeing more and more like Division I, big time Power 5 players coming out of state that aren't just guys that are going to Duke and North Carolina, NC State, but guys that Bama wants and Notre Dame wants and Ohio State wants. And D-line is one of those positions that North Carolina just produces a lot of. And some states just produce more of certain things than others. Pennsylvania produces a lot of offensive linemen and running backs and linebackers, and North Carolina produces a lot of defensive linemen, receivers, and DBs. Just kind of one of those weird things. Love this play. That's another one like you're talking about. This is a big boy here who's going against. See those hands? I said this in the Ebenezer clip, Sean. Anytime you see a D lineman going against an offensive lineman, if you can arch that back, you've struck a blow. Look at that offensive lineman.
Yeah, there you go.
Back, you've won that battle once you do that, especially when you're as long as Ebenezer is. I mean, excuse me, he is too, but as long as Rodney is, they're both pretty long kids. So there's a lot to like there. Get a couple more here, and then we'll get into the what next section. But this is a talented kid. Look at again. This is instincts. Quickly reads that. See how quickly he reads the swing screen. Gets there, and he's forcing a guy out of bounds.
I mean, some high school kids, even ones who end up playing at this level, just kind of piggybacking on sort of what you were talking about throughout there is. Like when you play that position, all they're thinking about is get to the quarterback, justifiably so. But at the same time, all those little finer points that you're talking about, like this is a guy who it's not just get to the quarterback. He knows that there's a bigger picture involved in this whole thing as well. Yeah, very cerebral.
That's that football IQ I was talking about. And we were talking about that in our show earlier today. We're talking about the secondary. And one of the things, you obviously look for physical traits. You need length, you need speed, athleticism, toughness, and all that. But one of the things I was talking about with Mike Mickens, we're talking about the secondary, but this is also something that been an emphasis for Marcus Freeman in general is he doesn't just want the physical traits. He's looking for guys who are smart football players as well. And there's plenty of smart football players that are also very athletic. I was talking about, Deion Sanders and the prime time and the gold and all that. But you ask anybody that played with or against Deion Sanders, they're going to say he was a really smart football player too. Mm-hmm. Ed Reed is a guy that was a very intelligent football player as well. The great players are usually pretty smart as well. I mean, Mike Singletary is a guy that ended up becoming a head football coach. Shouldn't shock anyone that grew up and watching Mike Singletary play. And so those are things where you look at. That's a premium for Marcus Freeman and his staff, and Rodney fits that mold. I mean, you can just watch the film and see, like, that kid's very instinctive. He reads and reacts extremely well, especially for a kid who doesn't spend his springs and summers going to this football camp and this 7-on-7 and this football thing and that football thing. He's playing baseball. He's pitching. He's working on his fastball and the ball placement and painting the outside corner and his changeup and all that kind of stuff. That's what he's working on in the spring. So imagine what it's going to be like when football becomes his primary focus. From an athletic standpoint, you're going to see a kid whose game is going to take off. So that's why, even though right now my grade for him is lower than the other services, if I graded and ranked the same way they did, where I kind of combine the projection with the now, he'd be a 5-star. He'd be a top 25 guy. So that's why technically my grade is lower, but that's because I grade differently. If I graded the same way they did, I'm totally comfortable with where they have him, in that 7 to 25 range. That's absolutely where I would have him because the tools are outstanding. Absolutely outstanding.
Absolutely. Yep. For sure. All right. So 2 defensive ends in the last week with, obviously Rodney Dunham being the latest here today. So where does Notre Dame go now as they finish out 2026 in terms of the defensive line part of the class?
Well, they're not done recruiting defensive linemen yet, Sean. They would take, from my understanding, talking to different people, they'll take at least one more defensive end, But if the right guys want to come, they'll take a couple more. And the reason why, and the reason that they're still able to recruit these guys is they just point to last year's film and say, look how many guys we played. I mean, we're going to play 4, 5, 6 defensive ends in every game. And the reason why is because we're going to play 16 games every, our plan is to play 16 games. And by the end of the year, your snaps are going to be what they are for that team that gets knocked out in the first round or that team that just plays a bowl game. You're going to play just as many snaps for us as you will for them. But you're going to be fresher. You're going to be able to last longer. You're going to be better in the fourth quarter. You're going to be better in the postseason because you're not going to pile up the snaps because we're going to have a great rotation going. And so that's sort of the pitch to these younger players. So, defensive end wise, obviously I mentioned earlier, Xavion Griffin Haynes is a 6'6", 235-pound kid from North Carolina that they're looking to get back on campus. Mikhail Blades, a 6'4", 240-pound end. Maybe he's a guy that could be a bit of a hybrid guy that could maybe play inside, can certainly play some 5 technique. He was on campus recently. He's another big-time player that Notre Dame is looking for at defensive end. And then there's one more defensive end that Notre Dame loves that they're definitely going on, and that's Dre Quinn, who's another 6'4". Here's shocker, Sean. Another 6'4", long-armed, athletic kid from Georgia. Very talented player. He was on campus recently as well. Hit it off very well. And he's just another one of those. That kid just fits really well at Notre Dame. You just got to be able to convince him of that. And I think they certainly convinced his family of that. But, Dre's a teenager. He's still thinking about all the other things as well. But great fit at Notre Dame. Really clicks with Al Washington and the staff. So he's another guy they're looking for. They want at least one more of those guys. Elijah Golden is a talented player from Florida. He's an end right now. I think they project him a little bit more as a guy that eventually grows into a 3 technique, but they give him a shot on the end too. He'll be on campus next week. I think next Thursday. I think the 17th or 18th is when he's going to come in campus. I think it's the 17th. I have to go check my notes again on that one, but he'll be on campus next week. And then there's the 3 pure interior guys. And so there's 3 guys right now that they're pushing for. I think they take all 3, but they want at least 2 of them as pure inside guys. And that's Tiki Hola, who's going to be on campus this weekend. He's a 6'2", 290-pound kid from Texas. He can play 3 technique, he can play nose, athletic kid, powerful, strong kid, a Polynesian player, which, as we know, Notre Dame has been making a big priority to try to get those young men because they're such great cultural fits for Notre Dame on top of being talented football players. It's just a natural transition to Notre Dame. We've seen going back to Manti and Kona Schwenke and Alohi Gilman. We've seen a lot of those players come to have success. And then currently you've got obviously a lot of success there. Junior Tuamaka, Kingston Maasa, Madden Faremo. So they've had a great deal of success there. I'd like to keep that going. And then Kari Wilder is a 6'4", 260-pound kid from California. He's 6'4", 260. He's got a massive frame. He's going to be an easy 290 to 300-pound kid, real twitchy, real athletic that they view as an inside guy. He had a great visit last week as well. And then they are finally able to get Noah Clark on campus. Where's he from, Sean? North Carolina.
Oh!
Another North Carolina kid. He is the bit of the unicorn of the people on the board. He's 6'3", 305. He's a pure nose. He's a pretty good athlete for his size. And they've been on him for a while. The communication has been great, but just convincing him to come visit has been a challenge. And if you look at all the other schools on his list, his official visits, I think he's officially visiting Duke, North Carolina, NC State, South Carolina, and Virginia Tech, and then Notre Dame. So he's going to visit this weekend also for the Blue Gold game. So those are 2 huge visits that are all part of it. And the board's not huge, Sean, but they're in a good position with a lot of these players. For now, it's like, look, this is a great foundation for the class. You got 2 5-star upside kids, 2 guys that are ranked in the top 50. This is going to help get some of those other guys because football players, more so than any other sport, in my opinion, they understand how important it is to play with other dudes. Because if I'm playing next to a dude or a couple dudes, then you can't double team me. Because if you do, he's going to crush you. If you double team him, I'm going to crush you. And so I think it opens up the floodgates is the goal for the coaching staff. And I felt like once one of the dominoes fell, that they would all start to fall. Technically, Ebenezer was the first domino, but as far as like how it impacted the class, it was actually Rodney was the first domino because Rodney committing then led to Ebenezer committing, and then now you hope those dominoes fall. The ideal size, they would like at least a 5-man D-line class. I think they'd like to get up to 6. There's an outside chance they go to 7, but I think that might be maybe one too many. But they may get to the point, Sean, where it's like, how do you say no to that kid? Just too good to say no to. But they're on the verge of an elite D-line class. It's just, now you just got to close, right? The board's great. You got talented players on the board, but you got to close. And that's really that next step for Notre Dame when it comes to closing out this class.
I mean, to your point about guys playing next to each other, I don't think it's a coincidence that when Notre Dame was best as a pass rush team this past season, it was when Riley Mills and Howard Cross were both playing next to each other. Like, that's when they were the most effective as a pass rush team, because again, you gotta pick one of them, and both of them were fully capable of wreaking havoc in the backfield. So,
and then you want it on the edge too, right? I mean, that's what.
Oh, sure. I mean, we're talking more about edge guys. But
I'm with you. Like,
yeah,
that's where they've had success rushing the quarterback more consistently over the years. You think of Jason Adamiola before the 2 recent guys. You go back to Jerry Tillery. What they haven't been able to do outside of really 2018, when you had Tillery inside and then you had Aguara and Khalid and Ogundeji and Dalen Hayes on the outside, is they haven't been able to combine inside and outside at an elite level.
Right.
And that's what they're trying to build to. And that's why getting guys like this on the edge.
It's always seemed like one or the other, basically.
Yeah.
So,
and that's why it's important to get guys like this, but then also add them to some of those better interior pass rushers that they have had more success with. But like, that's why they want Tiki Hola and Kerry Wilder, for example, because those guys are athletic players that can not only be run stuffers, but they can get after the quarterback. And then when you put them on the same D-line with edge rushers like they already have in the class, and then maybe you can add a Dre Quinn or a Xavion Griffin-Haynes or a Mikael Blade, now all of a sudden you're throwing waves of pass rushers at people. And in today's game, yes, you have to stop the run, but you got to rush the quarterback.
Yep.
Who rushed the quarterback better in the championship game? Ohio State did. That played a role. And, I still think that's just, I mean, look at the Georgia game. Who was able to do a better job of getting to the quarterback in that game? Notre Dame's D-line. And that had a huge impact in the game. So you got to be able to stop the run, but you also got to really be able to get after the quarterback. And guys like this are kind of what help you make that happen.
All right. So, again, big day for Notre Dame. Sorry, I've got something in my eye. I think I've got a loose eyelash or something there, but I'm rubbing my face. Big day with Rodney Dunham committing to Notre Dame. So, anything else that we need to hit before we move along?
I just think the final piece, Sean, is it can't be overstated how important these 2 most recent pickups are. Because if you look at Notre Dame over the years, they've shown that they can recruit quarterback at a high level in recent years. They've shown in the past and even recently that they can recruit receiver. If over the next 10 years, Notre Dame alternates between 1 year, you get Jaden Greathouse and KK Smith and Jordan Faison and Braylon James and Rico Flores. And then the next year, you get a Cam Williams, a Micah Gilbert, and Logan Saldate. And that's what you just do every year. You're going to be fine at receiver. You just got to develop those players. Running back, I mean, who's recruiting better at running back right now than Notre Dame? Tight end's not a problem. O-line's not a problem. They've recruited linebacker at an elite level since Marcus Freeman arrived, and they've recruited at secondary to elite level since Marcus Freeman arrived. It's the defensive line that's sort of that you've got to catch up to everywhere else. You've started to see some improvement there, but when you can start a class off with 2 kids like this, you start to say, boy, if you can finish this off, and Notre Dame starts recruiting the D-line like they're recruiting linebacker in the secondary and running back in the offensive line and tight end, now that's where you start to say, I'll stack that roster up against anybody in college football.
Sure.
That's where Notre Dame was back in the 80s and 90s, and that's what they're trying to get back to now under Marcus Freeman. They have certainly closed the gap in a long way in the last couple of years. These are the type of kids that are those final gap closers that if you start landing kids like this, that's when I actually have a couple gap closed shirts, Sean, that I said that I would wear if Notre Dame wins a title. These are the kind of kids that get you there. These are the kind of kids that don't narrow the gap on Georgia. These are the kind of kids that you like, okay, now we can compete with you. And I also don't think we can forget enough how it isn't that you just landed Georgia caliber players. You just beat Georgia for 2 kids they want.
Literally beat them to get these guys.
Not only did you get them, they did. Now, Georgia's going to be fine. It's a really good D-line class nationally. They're going to get some players, but that matters. You're now going into the South and beating Georgia for kids they want. Like, that tells you that Notre Dame is, dare I say, Sean, shopping down a different aisle.
Sack the groceries. I'll sack them up for you. All right. Hit that like button if you would. Of course, we appreciate it. Subscribe on all of our Irish Breakdown platforms. Believe is our parent platform right now, and appreciate everything that Believe does for us. And of course, you can find more stuff on the Champions Lounge or irishbreakdown.com as well. With that, Bryan, I've got a question for you. Are you ready for rapid fire?
Yes, sir. You know it. This is my favorite part. I just kind of said, well, I guess I'll talk about Rodney Dunham committing and all that, but I want to do rapid fire. So
here we go.
Excited.
Here we go. Brian was like, don't throw any baseball questions at me. So don't worry. There are no baseball questions in rapid fire today. All right. We've got the blue gold game, of course, coming up here in a couple of days. The number one question going into Notre Dame's spring practice was, of course, who's going to be the starting quarterback? Who's going to win the job? Perhaps the number one question now coming out with the transfer portal opening up in a week is, will any of these quarterbacks hit the portal when it's all said and done? So on a scale of 1 to 10, as we sit here right now, how confident are you that all three of the quarterbacks involved in this competition are going to be here when fall camp begins?
I'm at a 7.5. I don't want to go quite to 8. And honestly, if you were to ask me, okay, so you think one of them's going to transfer? I don't know. I don't think so. They all three seem to be very bought in. They all seem to be willing to compete. All three of them are still in the battle right now. I don't think a decision has been made. And I don't think a decision has been made from the standpoint of they're just not going to tell anyone because they want them to come back. I don't think anyone has technically has gone out and just won the job right now, which is why you don't need to tell one of the three that they're not going to win it because they're all still in it, in my opinion. But I also think that at some point in time, you have to start making some business decisions and say, look, especially the two older kids, Kenny and Steve, because you're getting a little bit closer to just not having eligibility. Can you afford to go into the fall battle and not win it? And, maybe one of them decides not to. I hope not, because I think they're all great kids. I want them all to compete. I love the depth at the position, and I want them all to get their degrees from Notre Dame. So I hope none of them leave, but this is also the modern era where I'd be a fool to sit there and say, no, they're all fine. They all love Notre Dame. They're going to be – just because you love Notre Dame doesn't mean you don't also value your own future and your own opportunities that may lead to you going somewhere else. You can love Notre Dame, but I just didn't work out, and I'm not going to be the guy. And I have aspirations to play professional football and to be a starter, and that's just not going to happen for me here. And just because kid does that doesn't mean everything he said about loving Notre Dame isn't still true. But he's got to look out for himself at some point in time once the spring's over with.
Yeah, Al Golden loved Notre Dame too, but he decided that there was a different career opportunity for him out there, so he could leave Notre Dame, still leave it behind and go someplace else. Just like you can love your home, your hometown, whatever, but you can leave, branch out, and find other opportunities.
I love my parents, but I live over 800 miles away from them because that's just what's best for me and my wife.
That's exactly right. I'm feeling around a 6-7 as well, but I think back to, it's amazing this was only 2 years ago, but it's 3 springs ago when you had Sam Hartman, Tyler Buckner, Steve Angeli, and Kenny Minchie in that quarterback room. And it's, man, look at this quarterback room, look at the future, that's out there. Now, obviously you still have 2 of those guys around, but the Tyler Buckner part of it, I think it surprised most of us that he bolted after the spring and headed down to Alabama. And I mean, obviously, he's figured out that maybe the grass, wasn't greener.
I wonder, and I've thought about this too, Sean. I wonder your thoughts on this. Do you think what happened with Drew Pine and Tyler Buckner after they left Notre Dame might factor into their minds? Just because you leave doesn't mean you're going to get that opportunity somewhere else. And look what happened with Tyler. Look what happened with Drew Pine.
Drew Pine going on his 4th school now. You're absolutely right. I think that, especially this group, because they're all really smart, and they're, and they all have, a ton of talent as well. But obviously only one guy is going to get this job. But I think that is a great point. When you look at a guy like Drew Pine, who, put in his time, a guy who, self-proclaimed loved Notre Dame as well, but he decided to bounce, obviously, for, for greener pastures and look for a new opportunity. And now
Right.
he's going on to school number 3,
Right.
3 years down the road. So maybe that
for
is
Drew.
well, I mean, school number 3 in terms of that he transferred to.
Yeah,
School
so
number 4 overall.
which is
Yeah.
why.
Yeah.
And the selling point is like, listen, guys, I know it's doesn't look good for you now, but let's not forget about this. In 2010, 2011, 2012, 2014, 2015, 2017, 2018, 2021. No, 2022. All those years, we know what they all had in common. At least 2 quarterbacks started a game
There you
because
go.
of injury or somebody getting benched. It's a lot of years. A lot of years where that actually, you count 2023 as well because Sam left and Steve started the bowl game, but that's a little bit of a different story. That's not the same kind of
But
same
you
kind
still,
of
that was the
situation.
3rd starter
Right.
that year because obviously Buckner starting the season.
No, I mean 23 when Sam Hartman.
Right.
22 was one where you had
22.
2 different guys.
Yeah.
21 is the exception because I believe Jack Cohn started every game that year, but Jack Cohn didn't finish every game that year.
Correct.
Because Tyler came in against Virginia Tech, then Jack came back in. Tyler came in or Drew Pine came in and finished the Wisconsin game. And so you had multiple times where somebody else needed to step up. So hopefully that'll be enough to convince him to stay, get your degree, and then have your opportunity to go somewhere else.
Like to our eyes, it's funny because as you and I talked about after we left practice Saturday, I guess it was, maybe the next day when we started to see like some of the things that other people were talking about that they saw in that practice. Like, even though it feels like, we should all be able to look at this and it's pretty obvious, like who we think the guy is, or at least, maybe like
who the two are,
whose cream is, closer to the, rising to the top. There's still going to be, it's still very subjective and people are still going to see sometimes what they want to see. And it can be the same in that room as well.
Right.
Like how stubborn does a guy want to be or not even stubborn? Like how much does he feel like, I'm still in this thing. So, why should I leave?
And the flip side is true, Sean. You may be in it, but you don't feel that way. You don't have confidence that way. So you may jump in and they're like, dude, you were in the conversation. Like we thought you had a shot to do this. But and you don't know how they're feeling in that room. You really don't. So it's interesting.
Yep, exactly. Fill in the blank. Isaiah Stanback co-hosted Good Morning Football this week. And it was interesting. He was asked which coach or player that he would run through a wall for. And it's blank that he said it was his college coach at the University of Washington, the one and only Tyrone Willingham.
Not surprising. And are you surprised that I'm saying not surprising?
See, I am a little bit.
Here's why I say Ty Willingham was not a good football coach. He wasn't.
And that's what, to me, it's surprising.
But here's why it's not surprising, because the question wasn't who did the best job of coaching you up on the technique. It was who would you run. I've talked to a lot of Ty Willingham players over the years. They loved Ty Willingham. He was a good person.
Oh, yeah.
He was a good man. They respected him. He cared about him. He could give some decent speeches. I don't know that I've ever met a former Ty player that said a bad word about him other than they kind of knew they weren't being coached well. But they really liked the guy. They respected him. And I think that's why if he said, hey, we're going to go out and do this, which is why Ty had some weird upsets in his career.
Right.
It's like, how do you go on the road and beat number 9 Tennessee and then lose to whoever you lost to the next week? It's because of that. You just weren't prepared for it. But some of those games, those big games, he could just beat Michigan in, 2004? He could just get his team up for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because they respected him as a man. And that's why I'm not surprised by it. Plus, if he played at Washington, I mean, the other options of who he played for probably.
That's very true. That's very true. There's a reason Tyrone Willingham ended up at Washington.
Right.
I just have to say, watching that and like hearing that segment and to hear Isaiah Stanback say it, like Tyrone Willingham was literally the last person, that I was, would have expected him to say. But then he said that. And then some of the things that he, kind of elaborated on were some of the things that you were talking about, the way he talked to him as a man and, like helped him out, not just in football, but in other aspects of his life. I guess I still didn't equate those two. Like he's the guy that I would run through a wall for.
You know what though? Young men, Sean, desire to be valued by grown men.
Sure.
young men, that's why you see these, like Marcus Freeman, all the success he has, still talks about his college. He's almost 40 years old. He's got 6 kids of his own, and he still talks about the impact. Jim Tressel, he has a dad who he loves and admires and looks up to, who is also a role model. So it's not like he's like, well, he didn't have a dad. No, but that's the impact that Jim Tressel still had on him, is because that young men want to be valued. They want to be told, no, you are good enough. I am going to challenge. I'm going to push you, not just in football, but over here and over here, because I care about you and I want the best for you. And when you can show a young man that you genuinely care about him, that you genuinely want to push him and help him be the best he can be, most of them respond incredibly well to that.
True.
And that's what Ty was good at. He just wasn't real good at teaching the
actual
some of the other
football
things.
part of the thing.
And the recruiting thing was Ty's biggest problem. It's
Absolutely.
like you got the number 1 player in the country on campus and you're out golfing. That's a true story.
No.
But yeah.
Oh, I know.
I've told you that story, I think.
So who would be the player or coach you would run through the wall for, Brian Driscoll?
I can only point to people that I've played for or coached for. I mean, I mean, I'd like to say Lou Holtz, but I don't know. I mean, I had a coach that I worked for actually named Mike Donnelly, who has since passed away. Coach Donnelly was my first full-time coaching job. So I was an assistant at Wittenberg in 2001. It was kind of like I was finished on my degree, and I was able to coach the tight ends, work with the quarterbacks. And it was kind of my first getting my feet wet in coaching. But my first, like, I've got to position to coach, I've got to recruit, I've got to do all that, was 2002 at Muhlenberg. And Mike Donnelly was our head coach. He had been the defensive coordinator at Columbia. And I always respected him because he was a guy that could have gone up the rank, Sean, but he chose to go down because he was a dad. He had 2 kids. They were young, and he wanted to just be part of their lives and be a dad. And you can't do that at the Division I level the way you can at the Division III level. So I always respected that as a man. But he was a great teacher. He was an honest guy. He was a good motivator. He's a guy that if I would have played for him, that's someone that I would have run through a wall for. He was a guy that I admired a great deal as a man, admired a great deal as a coach. And that's why that year we were as good as we were, because we had a talented team, but he could get the most out of it with how we prepared and those type of things. And that's why we had the success we had. Yeah.
Mine is, I had 3 high school wrestling coaches in 4 years in high school. And mine is my first one, the guy that I had my freshman and sophomore year before he was unfortunately let go. It's kind of crazy how he was the best one and he's the one that they let go. But it was, kind of personality conflicts with administration.
Why I stayed out of high school coaching.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he was tough on us, hard on us, made us hate him at times. But it wasn't because he was he wasn't a yeller screamer kind of guy. He just worked us, in a good way. Every practice felt like a death match at times, just like the way that we worked. And he always had this look, it was kind of, like a, just kind of a snide, sarcastic look that he could give you. And, that just got under your skin. And he just knew how to do all the little things and push the buttons that challenged you. And, just basically made you kind of say, F you, I'll show you, that kind of stuff. And, that was what, made you want to run through the wall for him, quite honestly, is you wanted to run through the wall to prove you could run through the wall, to try to get some kind of satisfaction out of the guy.
Which makes some coaches, that's how and it works.
Yeah.
It works. I mean, Lou Holtz, you'd hear Notre Dame players talk about Lou Holtz that way. Like, I'll show you, and that's exactly, what you don't realize until later is that's exactly what he wanted.
Yep.
It's like the scene from for Miracle when the assistant coach says about, he's like, they're all going to end up hating him. And the trainer's like, well, maybe if they hate him, then they don't think so much about how much they're hating each other. And the guy was like, it's just like the light bulb went off, like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But you don't think about it at the time. You're like, I hated that guy until you're 40 and then you're coaching and you're like, dude, I'm doing the same exact crap that the coach that I hated at the time did because it works.
That's exactly it. It works. That's it. Okay, so after shooting down Colorado's request to do joint practices with Syracuse, the NCAA is still going to look at the concept of doing joint spring practices in the future. Do you buy or sell this idea? I've been really curious. We haven't had a chance to talk about this, so I'm curious to see what you think about this, Brian.
I sell it unless they're going to extend the number of spring practices that you have. Okay, which is why I may want to wait till your next one to give my full answer, so that way I don't double up, because I know what your next one is, and that's gonna. It's easier to explain it when I'm looking at from the fall and the spring together.
Well, I like the concept of it. I do wonder in the spring how much coaches really want their team, doing full contact with another team, because it just feels like, the adrenaline gets juiced up, egos, kind of get into the mix. Do you really want your team, having that kind of live contact against other bodies?
You've got to be smart about who you're going against, and you've got to be smart about how you're preparing them to go into it. You're not going to give them the rah, let's go show Indiana what we're made of, or Purdue what we're made of, or whatever, who you're scrimmaging against. Say, guys, we're here to get work done. But you see in the NFL, they have these brawls and stuff. I think a lot of times that's because you've got guys fighting for jobs and employment, and it's a little bit of a different animal. But for me, it's more of the concern of, in spring, you're taking those kids out of class. Whoever has to travel, you're taking them out of class.
True.
How much work can you really do? I want to spend, if I only got 14 practices plus my spring game, how many of those practices do I want to take away where we're kind of going against another team? I don't know if I want to do that as much. Where in the fall, when I've got 25, 30, I might be more willing to do some of that. But if they were willing to extend the spring and give me like just 3 or 4 more practices during the spring, let us extend a little bit more, then I would buy it. And I think you'd be able to maybe to do a little bit more. Maybe you do some summer stuff. There's some summer things you can do, some summer workouts where you can do something with them. I think there's other options. I just don't know that spring is the best of the 3 between spring, summer, and fall workouts. If spring makes the most sense, because what's the one difference between spring period and then summer and fall? In fall camp, you're not in class.
Right.
In summer, you're in class, but most of those kids in summer school are taking online classes.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be a little easier to facilitate doing something together in those settings than it would be in spring.
Summer would be an interesting time. That's kind of intriguing to think about that.
Like a mini camp, something
like
that.
Exactly. Like a little 2 or 3 day kind of thing. And interesting. Okay, so you were kind of teasing it. This leads me into the next question. Fall preseason games or scrimmages. Kirk Ferentz has said that he would favor doing them as long as they don't count against a team's record. Would you buy or sell fall preseason games / scrimmages?
I would definitely buy that. And I think that's way more practical. And part of that's the level I came from. I came from the 1AA and Division III level where we always did have a scrimmage.
Mm-hmm.
What I would still like to see is not so much a one-day scrimmage. I would still like to see a thing where you spend a few days there and you go through practices together. When you're doing one-on-ones, you're doing one-on-ones against that other team. Most of these schools, like Notre Dame, Sean, could absolutely have 3 teams doing a full practice together because of all the fields that they have. They have 4 fields.
Right.
And so you could certainly do that where, you're playing against, let's say Notre Dame is scrimmaging against Illinois, because they don't play each other, right? So let's say the Illinois players, they're going to come here and they're going to spend 4 or 5 days here. They get their individual teaching. You have places for them to do film work, things like that. They have time in the strength program, all that kind of stuff. And then you come together and now it's okay. Now we're doing our one-on-ones with the receivers, DBs. We're doing one-on-ones over here with linebackers and running backs. And then you're doing some one-on-ones down here with O-line, D-line. And you're going against each other now, as opposed to your guys. And then you break and you maybe do some more teaching stuff. Maybe you do some special team stuff together like we normally see in a practice. Then you do inside run and 7-on-7. And then you do some more special teams against each other. And then you do some team stuff. Like that's going to be way more valuable than a scrimmage, a controlled scrimmage. In the scrimmage, for me, I would make sort of situational as opposed to just a live 60-minute scrimmage. So then you kind of get away from the who won, who lost.
Okay.
And do more so like, okay, we're going to work on the coming out period. Coming out meaning like you're at your own 10. We're going to work on base stuff, or it's at the 35. We're going to work on going in. So we're going to do sort of our 40-yard in. Then we're going to work on a red zone period where it's a bunch of team stuff and I would have some sort of competition, but not a competition that's necessarily where so-and-so beat so-and-so 27-24.
Right.
And I think you could get the same work, the same action out of that, but it's less concern of the who won, who lost stuff, which, can be a problem. The only caveat I have is you'd have to have some sort of rules about coaches recruiting players for the other team. That would be the only thing you'd have to somehow try to guard against.
Like,
but
you're not allowed to recruit anyone from the other team within the next calendar year.
Can't engage them in any way, shape, form, or fashion off the field.
Right.
Anything like that. Without coaches present,
because Matt Rule would obviously be vehemently against this kind of
thing. Because I didn't know who your player was. I didn't recruit him out of high school apparently, but I watched him in a spring game and I want to poach him. Like, okay,
I've got to have him.
Yeah, but no, I would love something like that, Sean. I think that would be very advantageous for the players. I think it'd be very advantageous for the coaches because you know how it is. We hear it every year. By the time you get to those last 2 weeks of fall camp, I just want to go play somebody else. You know, it's like how many times can I guard against the same team? Hey, the defense looked great. Yeah, they know what's coming. They literally play against the same plays every freaking day. There's only so much you can do. You know, hey, the offense is doing a great job picking up their blitz pickups. Yeah, I know they've seen all those blitzes before. I think it'd be really cool, like maybe 2 weeks before the first game, being able to do something like that in a controlled setting, in a practice setting. I think that'd be great. I'd buy the heck out of that. And guess what? 95 to or greater percentage of the schools, those kids are not in class during that.
Right.
And the only negative is the potential cost of the travel plus the hosting another team. But in today's era, that's minimal.
Seeing kind of how I thought of it, because like you're talking about, okay, Notre Dame against Illinois or Purdue, or, you know, like whatever. But what if you set it up so it's kind of, and, you know, you brought some interesting ideas that I hadn't thought about in terms of like the actual scrimmage itself, you know, doing situational stuff as opposed to an actual game. I definitely like the 2 to 3 days of the joint practices, you know, together. I mean, it's basically, you know, what they do with, you know, joint practices and NFL training camp and stuff, because like you said, guys are tired of hitting, you know, their own players, and coaches, you know, really don't want their own players beating each other up. But I think you could accomplish a lot by just doing 2 to 3 days of that. What if you did it in a similar fashion where now, okay, you do that for 2 to 3 days, and then on Saturday, it's, you know, Notre Dame against a MAC team, or you bring an FCS team up, something along those lines, and maybe even, you know, again, we're saying that it's not going to count against your record, but maybe instead of, you know, playing Samford in the middle of the season, you know, like the SEC team has that kind of exhibition game up front, and you're still, you know, selling tickets to it, and you're still kind of doing, you know, like a pay game for these smaller
and you
schools
pay them to come up. Yeah. I would definitely not do with an FCS school. I still worry about, you know, especially in a scrimmage setting,
like
there's always a greater risk of injury to the FCS players, right? You know, and
very true,
because then everybody starts doing an FCS team, and you kind of run into that little issue. But I would try to keep it regional as best I can. I'm okay if like Notre Dame wanted to bring Toledo over, as long as Toledo's up for it, you know, and then hey, we'll pay you and we'll give you a little extra something on the side. Kind of like what you're talking about. I didn't think about that as sort of like, instead of playing them in the regular season, I still value those games in the regular season though. I really do. And I don't know that I would get as much out of practicing against Toledo's players as I would
Illinois or Purdue, you know, like a Big Ten school in the Northwestern.
I'd want something comparable. That's the whole point of a scrimmage, is you want to play somebody that gauges where are we, and you know, like if you know, if you're Notre Dame and you're bringing up Indiana State
and you're just mauling them, what are you actually?
I mean, the only advantage is we're just not beating each other up for a couple of days. We're beating somebody else up for a couple of days, but I don't know if that's necessarily what you're kind of looking for in that setting. That's why I'd say like an Illinois, a Northwestern, a Purdue, a Michigan State, even a MAC school would give you some value, but I would want something that's a little bit more comparable. I think you'd have to maybe set some rules on you know, geographically, you can only play someone within a certain region, but then you get into challenges, but we're all in the same conference. There is no other team from this region, but you know, it'd be interesting, but I think summer or fall camp are the best times to do that.
Yeah. But then, you know, like, there's always the chance if you do that, you scrimmage them at the start of the season, you know, like say it was Indiana, and then you end up playing them in the playoffs.
Sure.
At the end of the season, you know,
but you're going to be such a different team though by the time you get to the playoffs than you are in fall camp.
True.
And you're not, and that's why I like the practice type of thing as opposed to an actual game, because now we're in certain situations and we're working, because you're still in that experimental mode at that point in time in the season where we're working on some stuff. You know, you may run some play calls that you don't necessarily, you know, you're not sure if this is really what's going to work or not. You're just kind of working on some stuff. And that would be kind of my thing is like, look, at the end of the day, if you're playing Indiana at the end of the season, they've seen everything you've got on film anyway.
True.
I don't know that there's going to be anything that they're going to gain from that, especially now. I mean, the only thing that I would do is I wouldn't signal during team. Just look, you've got the headpiece. You see the coaches at practice. They got the head. Just tell them what the play is. You don't need to signal for those 3 days while they're there. And, you know, because if you're recording the coaches putting signals in, that's not illegal. I mean, that's you're there. You're practicing with them.
Right. It's a practice. You can film anything you want.
I wouldn't signal, you know, and there might be some terminology that I would maybe not utilize, or there'd be some things that you'd hold back. But I just think there'd be so many advantages to the 1-on-1, the 7-on-7s, the inside run periods, where I just think there'd be a lot of value to it. And, but if you're a team like an Illinois, or I mean, not North, but if you're a team like, you got to be careful. Like, do I really want to go play? You know, if you're Toledo, do I really want to go scrimmage against Ohio State for 3 days and get our brains beat in and risk losing? You know, that's always the concern. But my thing is, you run that risk playing against yourselves anyway. That's football.
Would you still sell tickets to the scrimmage? Would you want the public there if you did, you know, like the actual, you know, end of it, the scrimmage part of it?
I'm fine with that. If they want to, I'm okay with that. I mean, NFL does that. I'm fine with that. Yeah. Okay. Do it in the stadium and give them a cut of the, you know, percentage of the gate. I'd be okay with that. Yeah. I'd be okay with that.
So yesterday we talked on the show here about changes that need to be made in sports. They ranged anywhere from rule changes to no game should start after 8 p.m. Eastern time. So my question is, I'm curious to see what you would say. If you could make one change in college football, what would it be?
So we're just going to tell the West Coast, F y'all. We don't care that you're on a different time zone. You got to start before 5.
The caveat was no game could start after 8 p.m. I'm sorry, it wasn't actually Eastern.
In their time zone?
Couldn't start, after 8 p.m. in the time zone that the game is being played in.
That I would support. Yeah. There's one off-field rule and one on-the-field rule that I would change. The on-the-field rule is simple. I was thinking of all these different rules. The overtime rule in college football sucks. I would go back to the old system, but start them at the 40.
I like that.
Instead of the 25, where you kind of got to get a first down. Yeah,
this 2-point shootout thing is ridiculous.
Stupid. It's absolutely dumb. I'd rather tie than that crap, honestly. Yeah. And I don't like ties. I think at the 40, there's a greater chance of getting stops at the 40 than at the 25, where you're literally in field goal range the minute you snap the first play.
Mm-hmm.
So I would start at the 40 and say, okay, same rules as they had before. That'd be my game rule. My other rule is, Sean, I think there's a lot of things wrong with NIL and all this kind of stuff. I'm supportive of NIL. I think the transfer portal rule needs a massive makeover. I would go back to where you have to sit out a year. If you transfer somewhere, barring if you're a graduate, you can go. I would also say that I'm a big fan of in your NLI, national letter of intent. If a school promised you something, they got to put it in your letter of intent. It's like a contract. And if
everything has to be up front,
you tell me I'm going to wear number 7 and you give me number 12, you violate it. And that may seem petty, but if you weren't going to give me number 7, then you shouldn't have promised it to me and you shouldn't put it in my contract.
Yeah.
You know, you have to live up to certain expectations. And then there can be times where a school can release a kid. Hey, we're okay with this kid leaving, so we're going to release him and he can play right away. There's all types of things. There's all types of exceptions, genuine exceptions, not, you know, some committee determines this kid does, but this kid doesn't, which was always stupid. The one thing I would change is you do not lose a year of eligibility as long as you are in good academic standing at the end of your term.
Okay.
You get that season back. So like if you redshirt, like right now, what hurts you is if I redshirt as a freshman and then transfer, I've lost a season of eligibility. Whereas if I redshirt as a freshman, transfer, as long as by the time I'm a senior, I'm in good academic standing, I would still have my 4th year. So that's how I'd get a 6th year. So I don't lose eligibility by transferring as long as you are in good academic standing, meaning you're on pace to graduate. You got to be a 2-2. Are you on pace to graduate in whatever time you set? then you get that eligibility back. That's what I think. Because I think we're seeing Drew. This is the example I use. Does Drew Pine transfer if he had to sit out a year? Or would he?
I think there's a lot of people who wouldn't. Yeah.
The reason I use Drew Pine as an example is because I think Drew made a very obviously emotional decision.
Mm-hmm.
And I love Drew Pine. I think he's a great kid. I love that family. But Drew Pine was pissed off that he started all year, went 8-2, and Tyler was getting the job back, and you were going to go to the portal. And I think he made an emotional decision that, look what happened. Whereas I think if Drew Pine would have had to he'd have been pissed. But if he'd had to make the decision of, do I really want to sit out a year and not play and then also not get my degree from Notre Dame? Or do I just stay, get my degree, and then transfer? And I'd even be supportive of them coming up with a rule where a kid can choose not to play that year and get his degree and then leave in a certain instance and get his eligibility back. I'm all about doing making sure they're actually student athletes again. We've lost that. These kids going to 5 schools in 5 years are not leaving with an education. You may give them a piece of paper that says graduate. They learned nothing. You can't learn anything when you're leaving that much. But I think if Drew Pine had to sit out a year, he probably comes back. He probably competes against Sam Hartman and then doesn't start. You could get his degree, and then he's still got 2 years to play somewhere else. And not only, so yeah, he's probably at Bowling Green anyway. He'd be a 2-year MAC starter. He'd have a degree from Notre Dame and a master's from somewhere else. And he has a much different looking career as opposed to going from South Bend to Tempe to Columbia, now to Bowling Green.
Yeah.
Without a Notre Dame degree. And yeah, that's why I think that rule absolutely needs to change.
The only tweak I would make to all of that is I would give, you get 1 free transfer after that. You know, if you transfer a second time, then you have to sit out.
Yeah, I get that. I just think that still opens up to, because here's the thing, Sean, you're not going to tamper for a kid that you're not going to have that next year. Like,
that's true.
You're just not.
That's true.
And kids are less likely.
That's a good point. Yeah. It's going to cut down on a ton of that stuff.
Yes.
If the guy has to sit for
exactly. And I still feel like
that's probably the only way you're going to eliminate,
because in your situation, like Drew Pine still has the freedom to make that emotional decision, or not the freedom. Sure. He's always had the freedom. This whole thing. Well, players should be allowed to leave. If
he's more likely than not
allowed.
He's going to sit on that a little bit longer.
Exactly.
And think about
it's going to be less of an emotional decision.
Yeah.
Kids have always been free to transfer. Always. You have to understand, if you're going to transfer, you have to sit out a year, barring these clearly defined things that could allow you to leave. That's what I would do.
Okay. I mean, it all makes a lot of sense. I can see all your points on that. And again, like, well, yeah, I already said my piece on it.
I'd still say the one-time transfer thing. If you couldn't go back to my rule completely, but I'd be willing to accept the one-time transfer thing if that was my only option.
Sure,
absolutely, because that's still better. Because you can't make the second
bouncing 3 years in a row. Yeah,
exactly. That's still I would if that was my hey Brian, you can't have what you want. You can either have Sean's idea or we're going to keep it the way that it is. I'd say, give me Sean's idea in a heartbeat. It's
or you can go back to your original school if they want you, and you don't have to sit out a year,
right? Like
something like that. I don't know. Yep. So my changes for college football. I talked about this yesterday. The targeting rule. I despise the targeting rule in college football. I would like to see. First time you flag a guy for targeting, it's just a personal foul, 15 yards. Second time, that's the ejection. If he does it a second time in the game, that's the ejection.
Which is the personal foul rule.
Right.
You get 2 personal fouls, you get kicked out. I love that rule. I'm with you on that. Here's one thing I would add to that, Sean, is if you get called for targeting and it's not a personal foul type of hit, they can review that during the break and remove the targeting from it.
Like so you happen to hit the helmet, but it's not like you're not, so you get leading with the crown spearing type thing.
Like, I would not review any targeting calls in the moment. It's a 15-yard penalty. If the ref got it wrong, you got it wrong. The review would only be to remove the targeting from the player to where now it doesn't count towards his 2 for an ejection. Does that make sense? Like, yeah. So still refs miss holding calls. You don't review it and then take it back.
Right.
Why is targeting rule the one? Because there's an ejection tied to it. You take the ejection out, we don't need to review it anymore.
Exactly.
They can go back and look and say, okay, hey, during the break, we reviewed this play. We've removed the targeting strike against the player because it wasn't targeting. He actually didn't lead with the crown or whatever, and then now he still has two left. That's the only thing I would add. I love your rule. I would still only and I would get rid of the review of it, except for what we just said, which is it can be removed. It doesn't affect the play anymore. It's something you announce during a break after you come back from a TV timeout. FYI, 14 strike for the thing has been removed. And then play on.
I like it. Makes a lot of sense. My other one is college instant replay. I don't like the system. The NFL has a system that is much more efficient. It's like you don't have to look at every single play. In theory, every single play in a college football game can be stopped down and looked at it. And I just think that it's too much. It's a pretty simple system that the NFL has. I think it makes a heck of a lot more sense, just to have the straight up challenge flag system. You win the challenge, you get to keep it. Not, you lose it and you move on. It just makes more sense to me because I just think that there is too much stopping down in college football, that creates just too much downtime over the course of what's already a long game.
I know this is rapid fire. Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
Isaac Sally brought up a thing about the transfer rule. I am a believer that a head coach leaving should allow any player to jump in the portal. The only rule I have is that once the head coach, I would put a pause on it, and I would give the new coach a week to meet with all the players and make his pitch to keep them there, and then I would then open up the window and let anyone transfer. Because if a coach leaves, if you fire a head coach, portal opens up for your whole team. If a coach leaves you, then I think there should be some protections for the school to give the new coach a chance to try to convince those players to stay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's like you're screwing a school twice. Their coach screwed you, and now he screwed you by your players can go. If you fire a coach, it's fair game. You chose to fire him. You as a school made that choice. If a head coach leaves on his own, I would say let the coach you've got a certain window to hire a coach. If you don't hire a coach within that window, then sorry, we can't hold up for these kids to leave. But if you hire a coach within a window, that coach then gets a week to convince kids to stay. Then the portal opens and anyone that wants to go in can go in. At least that way the coach gets his chance to convince kids to stay. So Isaac, I misread your initial quote. That's my one transfer caveat that I would have, because I do think if a coach leaves, then why should the players be beholden to that program? You can say all you want. You don't commit to a coach. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Come on. Like, my coach is an a-hole and I don't like anybody there, but it's a good school, so I'm going to go. No, that never happens. You're going to play for someone who's going to develop you as a young man. So, yes, you do commit to the coach as well as the school.
All right. You're a fan of the movie Draft Day, Brian, correct?
Yes.
So, if they made the movie today, remade, made it from scratch, whatever. If they did it today, who would play Kevin Costner's Sonny Weaver and who would play Dennis Leary's Coach Penn?
Oh my gosh, man, that's a good one. Because Dennis Leary was not believable as a football coach.
I didn't think so either. I thought it was bridge too far.
The best head coach in a movie ever was Denzel, and Remember the Titans. So I kind of have to go with Denzel, right? I mean,
not a bad one.
He was the best head coach in a movie. So yeah, I'd probably have to go with Denzel as the head coach. The GM would have to be some guy that's kind of a, like a little bit of snake oil salesman. You're like, I don't know if I trust this guy, business type of guy. Trying to think of who I think actually would fit John Krasinski.
Oh, that's not bad.
He just for whatever reason, just strikes me sort of like, that'd be a decent one. Yeah,
I like that
one.
I like
that one.
So it's funny you said snake oil salesman, because the first person I thought of when you said that, well, it's like, well, you just put Leonardo DiCaprio in there. Because
there you go.
Like he could easily,
there you go.
Be that guy.
He'd more be like the owner.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. My two candidates for the GM, though, probably not too far off, Leo. Brad Pitt, I think, would make a lot of sense. I mean, obviously, he played a GM in Moneyball.
As long as he's eating every time he's doing his scene.
He's going to eat anything. I feel like Tom Cruise would be pretty good in that role as well. You know, he's obviously not going to have the height of a Kevin Costner, but I feel like Cruz could pull that off. And my coaches, like, I didn't think about Denzel when I was thinking about mine, but like Friday Night Lights, whether it's the movie or the TV show, I don't feel like you could go wrong with either Billy Bob Thornton or Kyle Chandler.
I kind of like the Kyle Chandler role a little bit better, especially for an NFL head coach.
Right.
I think Billy Bob more fits the high school type of, mold.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Because like you could definitely for an NFL head coach, you could definitely see Kyle Chandler doing that.
I'm not a big fan of him as an actor, but I also think a potential GM candidate would be Ben Affleck. He kind of strikes me as someone who might fit that role pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because like GMs nowadays are usually a little bit younger. They're not like the older guys like they used to be.
True.
So you want someone who's got a little bit of youth to him.
And he's a pretty big guy too. So like you could believe him as like maybe a former player or something like that. Yeah. Someone who's been around the game a little bit. I like that.
Yeah. Somebody said John Hamm he'd be a good GM pick.
Yeah.
I think John Hamm might actually fit better as a coach. He's got a little bit more of that scruffy coach kind of feel to him a little bit.
Right. You said that, and I thought about Jason Sudeikis and Ted Lasso, but I don't feel like
if it's a comedy
movie, sure. If it was a comedy,
if we're redoing Draft Day and we're making it a comedy, sure.
Yeah, I mean, if it was a comedy, I would have him and oh gosh, I can't even. What's the name is escaping me now?
Steve Carell.
No,
Steve Carell would be a great GM in a comedy. A great GM in a comedy. Make Ted Lasso not Ted Lasso. Make Jason Sudeikis a coach and Steve
Carell is the GM. You know, like the absent-minded professor, kind of thing.
You made what trade? That'd be pretty good. That'd be good.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for tonight. That's going to do it for Rapid Fire as we zipped right through that. Ben Stiller is the coach. That's not a bad one either. Like, again, if you were doing the comedy route, Ben Stiller. All right. That's going to do it. Hit the like button before you leave. And, of course, subscribe, rate, review. Had a great time, Brian. It's been like at least a year since we did.
So I'll see you next April.
A show and a Rapid Fire together. That's right. End of next spring. This will be our new tradition. End of
Which
every
2027 commit are we going to be doing this show for next year? That'll be the prediction.
That's right. All right. We will talk to you next time on IB Nation Sports Talk.